Now, in today's business stock, Statistics Indonesia has released the report on November's exports and imports. Now, to delve more about the report, we have Amalia Adininggar as Acting Chief of Statistics Indonesia. Good afternoon, madam. Thank you so much for your time. And this is Han speaking from the studio. Now, regarding the report, how is the export and import report year to date compared to the same period last year?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us into this session. According to your news just now, that from January to November 2024, our export performance recorded as much as 241.25 billion US dollar. And then if you look at that, that it is increasing as much as 2.06% compared to the same period last year. And if you look at the import side, cumulatively from January to November 2024, then our import performance is around 212.39 billion US dollar, which is increased as much as 4.74% compared to the same period last year. So in this regard, Indonesia recorded the trade balance during January to November 2024 as much as 28.86 billion US dollar for this year. And then Indonesian trade surplus is recorded for 55th months consecutively since May 2020.
Well, that should be a good news in that sense. But now it seems like quite some numbers here for our audience to digest. Let's talk about the export report first, because this is interesting.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Have there been any significant changes in the destinations for Indonesian products?
So, if you look at the main export destination for our export products, then our main export destination is number one, China. And then China is actually contributed to around 27.5%. 24 contributed as much as 27.52% out of our non-oil gas exports. And then the second main export destination is the US. The contribution is 10.33%, and our third largest export destination is India.
Is there any info on the products, what has been the majority products to be exported, say, to these destinations countries?
For each destination, for example, our export destination to China, we can have a look at that one. China is actually our export dominated by coal going to China, and actually for the U.S. market, we export such as like clothes and footwear. And to India, our main export commodities is actually CPO.
All right, so now let's get into the import report, madam. What are the major commodities being imported into Indonesia, and also how do these imports align with the national economic priorities?
So actually, we import our main sources of our import. If you look at the countries, I would like to highlight the countries as the main import sources of Indonesia. And then again, China is actually among our main import sources because import from China contributed as much as 38% of our total imports. And our second main import sources is from Japan, and the third one is the US. So that China, Japan, and the US is the main import sourcings of Indonesia for our import.
And also, Madam, how do these imports align with the national economic priorities, as we heard?
Yes. So actually, so if I could say that, Indonesia's main import commodities is actually machineries. Machineries, which is, we call it the mechanical machineries and electrical machineries.
Yes.
And the thing is that the third one is iron and steels. But what I would like to highlight it is regarding to on export, Indonesian export performance, that our downstreaming, what do you call it, our downstreaming policies, that we are actually already implemented a kind of downstreaming policies, especially for our mineral products, such as nickels and coppers and also bauxite. Then it is really recorded into our export performance that our downstream products from some of mineral products actually increasing because of the downstreaming policy in Indonesia already implemented probably more than a decade ago, since a decade ago. So if I could see that the iron products and steel products and also copper and its derivation products, then it is contributed to our main export commodities right now. So meaning that we are really expecting that by having a good implementation of downstreaming policy of Indonesia, that it can really restructure the export commodities that will be exported by Indonesia in the future. So we are really expecting that in the future, Indonesia main export commodities will be more on processed products, processed commodities, not raw material commodities anymore.
All right, so let's shift our focus into a situation in the international or global stage at the moment, Madam. It is an undeniable fact that the geopolitical tensions and also the uncertainties in world's political situation at the moment would play a big role in the growth of our economy. And how have the global economic conditions and geopolitical events affected Indonesia's trade performance so far?
Yeah, actually, so far, we are not really feel any disturbance from our export and import performance from geopolitical and geoeconomic condition. Because as you know that the US is actually one of our main export destination, and also China is also the biggest export destination for Indonesia. And so far, we can see that compared to last year, our export performance to those markets are still increasing. And I think this is a good position for Indonesia, because Indonesia is neutral as a politics. We are neutral to both countries, and actually our main export commodities to the US is also the same so far compared to the last year. And also when we do export to China, even if we compare to last year, that our export to China is also increasing this year. So let's see in the future whether after the implementation of the new trade policy of the US, whether it will be affected to Indonesian export performance. But again, so far we could see that the trade policy is really affected to China, from the US policy to China, rather than to the other countries. And again, as Indonesia is politically neutral, then we hope that our export performance to those markets as our main export destination will still be improving in the future.
And hopefully the new administration of the United States coming in would not be a big effect in our trade situation at the moment. But now let's go back home to Indonesia for a sec, Madam. We know that in the near future, the President Prabowo would actually hold the imports of some goods, one of them being rice, in order to fulfill the self-sufficiency on food in that sense. But let's see on the previous month, the November, how's the rice import for November and what does it come from?
So if you could see the import of rice so far from January to November, we can see that during the whole period of January to November 2024, that Indonesia imported rice as much as 3.8 million ton of rice. Then, and most of the sources of the rice imports is coming from Thailand. And Thailand is around 31% of our rice imports are actually from Thailand, and secondly from Vietnam, which is contributed around 29% of our total rice import. And then thirdly is from Myanmar, contributed as much as 17.24% of our total import. And on the fourth place is Pakistan, around 16.7% of our total rice imports. And on the fifth place is India. Next year, that the government is planning to have self-sufficiency of rice, because rice imports is actually conducted because of to fulfill the need of our people for rice consumption. But next year is projected that the production of our rice will be increasing compared to this year. And if you can see that BPS also measured the rice production and produced the rice production statistics, and then we always update it every 3 months. And then we have a figure of rice production in this month and previous month, in the last 3 months, that the rice production of Indonesia within the last 3 months is increasing compared to last year.
All right, so in the previous segment, we also saw that a policy package has been launched, Madam. The 12% VAT will be implemented. And does the reason 12% VAT would have impact on our future inflation?
Let's see after the implementation of the increase of VAT to 12%, because we'll be recorded. Because the implementation of VAT of 12% will be implemented in January 2025, and then let's see in our next inflation press release that will be conducted in February 2025, and let's see whether it will be affected or not. As far as I know, that it will be limited products that will have an increase in VAT for 12%. Not all commodities, not all goods and services, only some unlimited goods and services, as far as I know. So I think let's see the result of the impact of this implementation after we record January inflation in February, in the beginning of February 2025, that the inflation number will be released on that date.
Acting Chief of Statistics Indonesia, Amalia Adininggar. Madam, thank you so much for joining us and thank you so much for your time. That was our conversation on Indonesia's trade balance for November 2024 on today's Business Talk. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, X, and YouTube. Our handles are @CTodayNews. We are also available online at ctodaynews.com.